Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. It is Francesco here. So guys, today's video is going to be dedicated to a chat with the CEO of Coda. Now I've mentioned Coda a few times before. It's a new resource that basically takes documents to a new level, helping you to build out this sort of living document that includes a whole host of multimedia and making a document a bit more interactive. Now, Shashir Motra, which is the CEO of Coda, he previously used to work at Microsoft and Google on the YouTube team, and it was quite an exciting chat. I got to chat with them about 3 weeks before this, 3 to 2 weeks before this. We got a good chance I got a good chance to learn some of the things that are coming out for Coda, and also about how you could use Coda just past the basic sort of tables and simplistic stuff. He showed me some of the sort of formulae and sort of setup like that. So we will be doing a separate video with one of the users of Coda to demonstrate some of the scenarios. Although Shashir goes through lots of different scenarios in this video, I think that's going to be quite a beneficial video, particularly when you're looking at the small things inside of that. So guys, I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. The great thing is Shashir did offer me a link that will be available in the description below that passes through the invite process of Coda. So apparently you guys get instant access, which is awesome. I'm really excited for this interview. So let's dive in and chat with Shashir Malhotra, the CEO of Coda. Hello, everyone. We are joined by the CEO of Coda, Shashir. It's great to have you, Shashir.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. I think the first question I'd like to start off with is, when you're developing Coda and creating it, what was your inspiration behind it? Because it's quite an exciting resource, especially in the productivity space right now.
Yeah, I think it's, some people describe it a little bit like a passion project. It's something I've been wanting to create for almost 20 years now. So the way the product shape looks and so on has little pieces have been evolving for a long time. Coda at a very high level, Coda is a new type of doc. It blends the best parts of a document, a spreadsheet, a presentation, applications into a new canvas where you can create docs as powerful as apps. And that last piece is really the key. It mainly starts with an observation that we think the world runs on docs, not apps. That if you go look at how any team operates or any family or group of friends or so on, and you ask them what applications they use to run themselves, they might name they name all sorts of different software, and they've got this customer system or an inventory system, or they've got, at home, you might have a bunch of apps on your phone. But if you actually watch what they do all day, they'll turn to documents and spreadsheets, presentations, communication tools, and that's really what anchors their day. And so that's kind of one observation. And then the other observation is that we think that those fundamental docs haven't really changed in almost 40 years. And the running joke at the company is that if Austin Powers popped out of his freezing chamber, he wouldn't know what clothes to wear or what music to listen to, but he would absolutely know how to work a document, a spreadsheet, a presentation, because the core metaphors are exactly the same as WordStar, VisiCalc, and Harvard Graphics from the 1970s. And so that's sort of the frame for this. And we said, if we were starting again from scratch and were to create a new type of doc, what would we create? And that kind of inspired Coda.
Yeah, it's quite exciting we met 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you showed me through Coda. Obviously, I had the opportunity to try it out, but the advanced functionalities I didn't initially see, and that was the exciting part. Maybe you can take us through a couple of the ways you could use it for personal and team-based activities.
Yeah, sure. I pulled a few examples of both, and by the way, the way you just described it is somewhat intentional. The product is structured to be a little bit of a Trojan horse. That it's meant to start very simple and then give you a set of building blocks that allow you to build up much more interesting examples. So let's see. I pulled a bunch of things. I'll let you direct me a bit as you see things that you think are interesting. This is the landing page, which so most of your viewers have seen or take a look at after this. But we sort of describe the product as a
I was
Sorry,
going to
go
say,
ahead.
just a question there.
Yeah.
When people are signing up, it's invite only at the moment. How many invites are you accepting right now?
Yeah, I guess there's a little bit of history there. We decided to build a product in stealth, and so all of our early testers, we did that without telling people, and then we did this launch last October for our beta, and actually got a somewhat surprising level of interest. We kind of did it quietly, and ended up getting more interest than we expected. And so basically the way it works today is you request an invite here, and then we try to get back as fast as possible. But really what we're trying to do is bring in new groups of people every week. The product gets different and better every week. And we're looking at what people do and which features they try. And so that's sort of the process. It's somewhat random. There's a part of the process there where it asks for use cases, and so we do a little bit of dividing up, and we'll take all the people that might have a personal use case one week when we've added something that is something a little bit more personally centered, and then you do something different the next week, and so on. But yeah, that's the current model. Hopefully we'll get out of that soon, so and open it up to everybody. Yeah, so actually, creating this landing page was super fun because we got a chance to sort of explain that same story. Docs haven't changed in 40 years, and in the meantime, there's all this parade of packaged software, but the thing we actually turn to get work done is Docs. And why is that? Well, that's because Docs and Sheets are really flexible, and anyone can make them. But we felt like we needed a new one, and we spent forever on that animation, getting that to work right. And just sort of walking through some of the top level things of pulling everything together into one doc in a way where everyone can work their way, but that sort of grows with you. I like this phrase, Minecraft for Docs. It's really fun. So in any case, when you log into Coda, let's go back to the top here, you'll land in a document list that looks like this, and you can create a new document from here. And a new document in Coda is a blinking cursor on a blank screen. It's like you said, the product starts simple. I like to think of Docs as sort of our Trojan horse. That if you want to use this just as a good document surface, they're pretty good for that. But really, the interesting things happen as you scale from there. So people tend to start there, and then there's a set of templates. And this template gallery has a bunch of different ideas in here of how people are using Coda. We've had a lot of fun creating these. And I thought I'd primarily walk through some of these different ones. We have this button down here where people can submit their own doc. We added that a couple months ago. And so we've taken some of the ones that are particularly interesting, and they put them in this sort of top shelf here. From our maker. So it's going to walk through a few of these sort of real world examples of how people are using Coda. But let's see, before I do that, let me just give you a little quick tour of the product. So this is a doc we've been working on to redo sort of our welcome document, and I thought that would be a good way to show you what we're doing here. So here I have this document. The first thing you'll notice is that it's a doc, and you can do lots of doc-like things. I can write anywhere, and I can it's a modern document, so it's real time, it's collaborative, sort of like you're used to with Google Docs and so on. So as your friends and colleagues do things, they'll see it as well. It can embed various different things, images, videos. A lot of the collaborative features that people are used to these days are all here. So you can go add comments and pull people in. And it happens to support some things that people ask for a lot now, like Markdown. And so you can go make lists. You can make code blocks like this. And you can even, use emojis. And so it's a pretty good document, but really the document is meant to be an easy starting point. And what people end up finding out very quickly is the first sort of interesting thing about Coda is that you can put tables and text together. actually, just to be able to show all of this, we this present mode, so I can show you all this as I go through here. And so here I have a table embedded in a document, and you'll notice the table is a little bit less like a spreadsheet and a little bit more like a database table. So columns have names, and they have what we think of as formats. So I can say this one is a date, and this one is a select list, and maybe I'll add one here, which is a slider, and say this is I want the number of effort days for a particular project, and I can sort of move these things around. And it's built so it sort of seamlessly integrates with your document. As an easy example here, I can come and I can mention things. I can do things like @write blog post. And I get a reference to that row, which you can imagine you do that if you're like taking notes in a meeting or so on. If I hover on it, I see all the information about it. If I open that up, actually, let me do that with. I'm just going to do that with. I'm going to move the column over to the left so you can sort of see how it's working. So I'll open up that row, and you'll see it's all connected together. So I can, as I move this, you'll see the little slider there move, which is kind of fun. You can also put formulas anywhere. Some fun examples, you can do some easy ones. You can say, just put some math in here. Maybe I want to just put a little countdown timer in here. These formulas can actually reach out to the world as well. Remind me which city you're in right now?
Plymouth, UK.
Plymouth, UK. We'll see how well Google does. That's roughly where you are now. It's kind of fun. The most important part about this sort of blended together documents and tables is sort of a lot of the things you're used to with spreadsheets work here as well, but they're sort of pulled out of the grid. So some examples I've written in here. This one is a formula that just does a count of the number of things in that list up there. And so as I add things to that list, you're going to see that count change. Undo those. The formulas can get a lot more advanced than that. So for example, this one here says take that team to-do list, filter it down to just the ones assigned to a person, in this case assume we're Maria, and count those up, which is kind of fun. And so again, I can come in here and say, Maria's got an extra task, and you'll show that here. This one, I'll rewrite this one just so you can see how it works. I'm going to write a formula that says I want my team to-do list, and I want to filter it down. So the way these functions work, we support basically most of the common ones that you have in spreadsheets, but we've extended it in a bunch of ways. So this is a filter, which is sort of like a SQL select query. And so I can take this one and say I want to know the tasks are assigned to Maria, and it's autocomplete that helps you through that process. And in that previous formula, I had just counted them together. And so this is actually, you'll notice this notation where you can take an object and then a dot and then a function. We actually support it both ways. You can do the same thing as a count of those things like you're used to in Excel or a spreadsheet. But we find this more readable and more powerful. So this is a formula I wrote over there. If I take that and I just remove the dot count, you'll see that I get a list of those different things. And same way, I can hover on each one and see what's happening with it. And if I just come up here and say, actually, Maria is no longer working on this one, you're going to see that list change. So you get this document, and so it's not just tables and text together, sort of next to each other, but really blended together in a way that's pretty powerful. The next thing people generally discover about Coda is that you can connect these tables together and create these things we call views. And so this is the same table, just been extended in a few ways. I added some colors. I added some we call this a scale format on a column, so I can give some sense of the confidence of how likely we are to be able to hit our dates. And down here, I've created a view, and this view is just a view of that same table, but it's filtered to status equals in progress. And so if I come up here and I change something to in progress, it'll show up down here. So it's a pretty powerful concept. Again, as I change things here, you'll see that top row and the bottom one moving as well. So that's sort of next thing people tend to figure out about Coda is I can then create these views that everybody can have in their own way. Let let me switch to layout. So then I take that same table, and I'll flip it back to a table for a moment. So this is that table. It happens to be grouped in a particular way. So let me just ungroup it so you can see, we can get right back to that same thing we were looking at earlier. But grouping is kind of a fun, interesting a way to look at data, and you can create these things that almost feel like pivot tables. So you can group in a couple different dimensions and see what's happening. It's all still editable. So as Maria finishes this work, she can go mark it done. But what I'm going to do is actually flip it to a card view. So people who really like seeing things that are a little bit more like a Kanban board, they get something like this, and it's all connected together. There's a bunch of different views. So if you go through that list, this is a chart view, which is a Gantt chart. And again, all connected. So I can edit here, and it'll edit everywhere. This one here is a bar chart. This one here, actually, we just introduced, is a calendar view. So this gives a view of the same data, although I don't know there we go. All the data is in November in this document, and so you can see, get the same data and see it as a calendar view. Not particularly interesting in this case. And then the last step is, so you've got a new type of document and table blended together. You can make these tables look really interesting. And then we have this set of things we call controls. Just come back here, and I can show you most of what I've been showing you is available in this menu up here. So we have these controls. So these are like date pickers and selectors and so on. Let me just I'm going to add one here, so you can see how it works. Center this and say, let's add a button. This is one of the more fun controls, and it'll say add a cool new row. And so I'll just do a really simple case. I'll show you some more interesting ones in a moment. And I'm just going to tell it to add a row to this interactive team to-do list table. And it's a pretty simple button. All it does is add a row down here. So you can see how it's working. You can write some more advanced ones. This one will mark it done. This one will actually delete all the ones that are completed. So you can build up these sort of interesting different examples in your docs. So that's a little quick tour. I like to describe it as a new type of table, a new type of document, a new type of application, and all blended together into one seamless canvas.
Yeah.
All right.
It's really exciting. And one of the things that a lot of people, when they're getting started, is the templates. I think that's quite an exciting area. Maybe you could take us through like an example of one of those.
Yeah. So I picked a couple, but feel free to call out ones that you want to see. So the one I thought I'd start with, this one was from Uber. So they were one of our pretty early testers, and this doc. First off, every template in here has a little welcome description of what's happening, and then you can click a button to try a demo. And so you can come in here, and this is a sort of an open play space where you can make edits. You're not affecting their document, and as you make edits, you can just play around. And if you like it, you can hit copy doc, and then you'll get a sort of personal version of this template that you can then work with yourself. So here I've got this example they built. So this was built by Yuki and Yishin. Project Carbon was their project to rebuild the driver application for Uber. And it was a few hundred people, and it was ops and engineers and marketing and so on. And the sort of core of this document is here. So they have this area with features, milestones, and teams. One thing I didn't show in the walkthrough is that you can actually connect tables together. So one of our column types is a lookup. So I can look up from one table to another. So this has a feature table that looks up from this milestones table up here, and a teams column that looks up from the teams table up here. And in that way, everything's sort of connected together. And so as things complete, these formulas update and so on. The way they ended up using it is every team went and created their own folder over here. So these sections, I didn't say much about this either. These sections are meant to feel a little bit like tabs in a spreadsheet, but turned sideways. And so they create sort of spaces for people to be able to work, but it all works inside of one document, which people tend to really like, is one central area to keep things together. And what will often happen is, a team, like say the mapping team, will end up with an area where they keep their write-ups and their specs, and then a different area where maybe they're keeping track of their features. But this is just a view of that same table, and so everything is connected together. Maybe they end up taking their meeting notes in it, and they can go and refer directly to those different features as they go through this. In the Uber case, this particular document, this is obviously a sort of synthesized data. This document had or has something like 30 of these different folders, for every little sub team has their own area, and each one is totally different. Some people really like looking at things as cards, and some people take their meeting notes in different ways, or they've got a Gantt chart, or they use GIFs a lot, or maybe they're using calendar. But the heart of this document was a couple things. One was this notion of an escalation path. So they told each of their teams, you're mostly in charge of doing your own work, and you can kind of work in your own space. But if you ever have an issue where you need help, you just check this box. And so create new user onboarding flow has an issue. They had a weekly meeting where they would go back and look at just the ones that have been marked as having a funding shortage, and then they'd go resolve it, and it would just flow right back to the other area, so that everything was updated. And then the other thing they really loved was when we shipped charts, is this ability to get a sense of what's the progress towards a milestone with this chart. And they did it with this little selector, so they could say, all right, I've got milestone A and milestone B, and the dog food milestone, and they could see how close they are to being ready for each of those different things. So that's kind of a fun one. As I was thinking which other ones to show you, there's I really like this one. This is made by a woman named Liz Derby. She works at Betterment, company in New York that helps people with their personal finances. And she's a marketing manager there, and so she had picked this up because she was using in every marketing launch, she had showed us, actually, it was really interesting. Like, she would show us a folder in Google Drive that had for a single marketing launch had literally 100 documents and sheets and presentations and so on. And now they end up with one Coda doc per launch. And so this is the template they use for that. And one of her sort of core insights here was this little launch calculator thing there, where you come in and try to assess the importance of a particular launch. And so it actually asks you these 6 questions, and then it moves you between these dots to tell you, hey, how important is this launch? That was kind of a fun example. This one, this is Intent HQ, it's a company in England, and this one was created by the CEO Jonathan Lakin, and in this case, this was really built for a sales use case. So this is a building up a sales forecast, and so he's got different sales stages, and you can build his sales plan with their focus, and then their sort of areas for their actual plan, and they then use it to build out sort of specific close plans for each customer, and then they do a whole bunch of different. They're one of our most interesting users of charts, and so they've got all these different charts of different ways to look at data. So I like that example. Let's see, I pulled 2 others. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the ones that you showed me in our last call was the to-do list sort of process that you go through. That'd be great. That'd be a great.
Yeah, sure. That's great. So this is that one. So this is kind of a fun doc to write. This is so my to-do list philosophy, and people who know me well know I've got a kind of a different way of managing to-dos. And so I wrote this up, and it really started as a blog post, as a actually I wrote it. I used to work at Google, and so I'd written this for the YouTube team as a way for them to think about to-do list. And it's got a set of observations. Like, I think people are either you're an etch-a-sketcher or you're a piler. And if you're an etch-a-sketcher, you start every day fresh, and you erase everything, and and start again. And if you're a piler, then you take anything that you want to work on and you get it out of your head by putting it into a list. And I find that there's these two types of people really don't understand each other that well. And so and certainly tools are not really built well for both cases. And so anyways, this document, I'm a piler. I definitely get things out of my head, get it on the list, and sort of make it work that way. And so there's sort of 4 different philosophies here. I like this one from Mark Twain. If you haven't seen this one before, is basically he's got this quote that says, if it's your job to eat a frog, do it first thing in the morning. And if you have to eat 2, then eat the biggest one first. And just to translate that to to-do list, what that means is generally people take the hardest task and they push it off to later. And the philosophy here is take the most important, hardest, ugliest task and do it first. And so anyways, there's a set of these philosophies, and then the way the doc is structured is just sort of walk through that process. Say if you're a piler, the first thing you should do is set up your piles. And it's really, really important not to have too many piles. If you have too many piles, you'll confuse yourself. And so I've got a particular view of how I do priorities and categories, and so you can sort of see some of the I do today, this week, this month, someday, and done. It's pretty simple. And then I have a category system here, tech, business, G&A, people. I've actually used the same schema for like 15 years, so it's worked with me through many jobs. My wife asked me the other day, she's looking at me doing this, she says, hey, we're 5 and 6, and I said, well, there's some history behind that. There used to be a 5 and 6, and then I sort of smushed them in the others, but it was like so glued into my head that 7 and 8 mean these specific things. And then the other main philosophy for me is that I used to spend a lot of time in my task list. Like in my job, a lot of things are not really on my plate. There are things I have to watch, but somebody else is actually doing it. And I used to very specifically name who was on each one. And I found that actually that wasn't that necessary. That it was enough to just say me, not me. And then, you set up your task table, and, mine has 7 columns, 3 of which are lookups. So these 3 are just lookups back to those piles, priority, category, and who. And then I just do task, next step, and future steps. And next step is kind of this GTD, David Allen's got this wonderful book about the hardest thing to do with any project is take just one step. And so this is sort of built off that same philosophy. Is in my daily to-do list, I'll have a next step where I'll go through and say, like, what's the one thing I need to do to move this forward? And then I can work off of that. And then it's got a set of views. And so the view I tend to spend the most time on is this one. And so it's just got all my tasks, and it's grouped by what's on my plate and what's not on my plate. And then it's different priority. And then I have a little slider here so I can get focused. So I can say, all right, I only care about the things that matter today, or sort of more broadly, or I can filter it down and say, like, I just want to focus on the let me say, like, the tech related things, and you'll see this filters down to just the tech tasks. But some people really like more of like an agenda-like view. So this is the same idea, but in an agenda view. It's got this frog thing that says, what is my frog item? Actually, it's got a little thing here where if I pick 2 things to be frogs, it's going to turn red. So you're not really supposed to have you're not supposed to have 2 things like that. Yes, it's all connected together. And if I say, all right, this is important, but I'm going to move it to somebody else's plate, you'll see all these different things change, or maybe you do it as cards. So it's kind of a fun example. I had one more interesting one to show you. This is one that hasn't made our template gallery yet. It just got submitted, and this one is really interesting because it makes use of a feature we just shipped called buttons. And I think I showed you a simple example of a button earlier, but this has got a slightly more advanced one. And so this is made by a guy, Ben. He's an outdoor school instructor in Atlanta, so runs this rental desk where they can check out different equipment. And so he built this doc that has basically a list of all the different equipment he submitted to us as a sort of example of managing inventory in Coda. And so we have all this different equipment. These are all the different bikes. And what he did was he built out a little searcher, so I can come in and say, I want road bikes or mountain bikes, and this thing changes, and you can sort of see a few different ways to filter this down. But his use of buttons here was just so creative. So he's got this button where I say, I check it out, and you notice like a bunch of fields fill in. I can check it back in, a bunch of other things happen. If I click needs repair, it actually pushes it into another view here, which he calls sick bay. I can sort of move these, if I move a couple of them into the sick bay, you'll see, there's two different things in the sick bay now. And it's such an interesting way to do this. He was just describing that this was done on paper and pencil. Actually, I guess that their particular equipment that's always has trouble is the stuff in the boathouse. They have kayaks and paddles and so on. It's like they never really know what's there, and so they walk over to the boathouse, pencil and paper, and try to check everything in. And so this is a kind of nice way to do that. So.
Yeah, it's super interactive, and whenever anyone, so for example, when they press the needs repair function, it goes and assigns it to someone else in the team, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way he did this particular template, if you look at the button, it checks it out to them. So I think it was meant for their particular person, but it'd be easy to change this and say I wanted to instead of yeah. So it's assigning it. This is my demo account, so my name in this account is Felix Marlin. So it's assigning it to me in this particular case. Yeah, that's a kind of a fun example.
Brilliant. And while we're on the sort of topic of the future of Coda, maybe you could guide us to what we'd be expecting next with the platform.
Yeah, we got a bunch of exciting things coming up. But I'll call you back for talking through some of the interesting ones. Certainly just to give a little tease, I think I would say the requests we get tend to be at two extremes. So there's a lot of requests we get on the detail of the product, and people will once you start using it, it's a product that you tend to live in, and so little things being off will really frustrate people. And so we added Markdown that way. People found it to be tedious to go select formatting over and over again. Actually, spell check was really high on the list, and so we got spell check in, which is really interesting. And then at the other extreme, I would say we get requests for things that really speak to this promise. So, like I said at the beginning, our real objective here is to help people build docs as powerful as apps. And so some of these examples, I think I'm close. I mean, I think this is a pretty credible inventory manager. But we think we can go a lot further on that. And so we've got a couple things coming in actually just the next few weeks that I think are really exciting. That'll really lean into that. What does it mean to make a doc feel more like an app? So you'll see a couple of those soon.
It'll be really exciting. Shashir, I really thank you for coming on and talking to the community about Coda. Where can people start discovering Coda? Obviously at coda.io, right?
You go to coda.io and you'll sign in. I'll send you actually a link for your viewers, and you can stick it in your description, and that'll let people in right away. So that your viewers get a fast look.
Exclusive invite right there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on today. We'll be doing probably a separate advanced video, which sort of dives into some of those formula stuff, but I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Francesco.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll see you very soon. Cheers.
Great. Bye.